Hello and welcome to the show. Today's episode is about lighting efficiency and state changes with our special guests, Anthony Vilgiate and Ryan Doyle from Agxano. So let's start by having you guys introduce yourselves. Let's start with you, Anthony.
So I'm Anthony Vilgiate. I'm the president of Cultivation, which I'm their consulting firm that does the design and manufacturing for Agxano. I'm the head scientist as well. We're located in Spokane, Washington. I've been in the legal 420 business since 1998 out of California with the Compassionate Care Act, and spent most of my time working on the photometrics and the lighting plans and controlled environment agriculture. Majority of what we do is in the cannabis space, but we still have about 30% of our total business is in floriculture and stuff like that. So passionate about it. I love what we do, and I love the direction our industry's heading right now.
Okay, well, thanks for being here.
Appreciate
How about you, Ryan? Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Ryan Doyle. I'm the vice president of product at Agxano. My background has been in technology and startups, building platforms on wireless networks. So the previous project before this, we built a project called Vilgiate, which was a smart city application connecting things like gunshot sensors, air quality sensors, lighting, storm sensing, bring it all together in like a very digestible way for city point of views, things that they care about, and then stitching together the data so in a usable form. And so with Agxano, we've leveraged a lot of that same infrastructure in terms of creating a network to identify the things that matter, that affect plant growth the most. So you have lighting is a critical component of it, and then you have the environmentals, so the temperature, the CO2, the VPD, soil moisture, soil EC. And so we deploy wireless sensors to bring all of that real-time information back for you to make decisions off of, but then put that into a machine learning algorithm to tease out through the intentional changes that you made, and the sometimes you make a mistake, things get a little bit away from you, and it turns out that had a positive effect, to then optimize and select for things like yield, quality, whatever those parameters that our grower is looking for.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thanks for being here. And to start, let's talk about the recent changes going on around the country that are impacting energy efficiency requirements. The first one I heard about was California implementing Title 24. What is Title 24 and how does it impact cannabis cultivations?
So Title 24 is a broad energy scope code that's published out there. It's actually currently already in force. It has been since 2023. They're actually working on the code revisions right now for the following year through CLT. So Ryan and I both sit on the stakeholders board of that, and we help guide the CLT and the case studies groups on what impacts these are going to have. Because obviously we're dedicated to conserving energy. We want to be good stewards of our environment, good stewards for our industry, but we also don't want to impact a grower's ability to produce a high quality product. So if somebody arbitrarily walks in as a non-horticulturist and says, we decided you can only have 20 watts per square foot, well, that's not a good thing. So they pulled guys like us in to say, what are the minimums? What's the best practices we can put together? And California has one code that for mixed-use greenhouse that only allows you to have 6 watts per square foot. And that's a very small amount of power per canopy square foot, where states like Chicago and Massachusetts have a 36 watt per square foot bottom threreshold, all the way up to 50 in Massachusetts. If you have a tier 1 or tier 2 license, you can negotiate some stuff around that. So we're trying really hard as a stakeholder in the industry to help guide them and to putting together responsible legislation that doesn't impact the growers to a point where they can't produce the yields and the quantities they want and the square footage allotted to them. And this is going to roll out sometime in 2024. It's out for public comment now. We have another round of meetings on the 16th of May that's for public comment, that we're kind of cleaning up some language. So we're all talking the same things. When someone says light intensity, well, what do they mean? Do they mean PAR? Do they mean foot candles? I mean, we're really trying to narrow this down so that people are measuring the right stuff and getting the right results as a result of the legislation we're putting together for
them. What about Illinois? What changes is Illinois looking to roll out?
So are you looking at just Illinois' full cannabis legislation or just their energy stuff? Because man, there's a lot happening in their just the cannabis legislation there. Some of the decriminalization, the social equity programs, a lot of that has moved through the legislature there. But I haven't seen any dramatic impacts that are going to affect commercial licensed growers in Illinois on the energy consumption front right now. Their biggest thing, and it happened in 2019. I'm trying to remember. I think I took a note on this so I could tell you exactly which bill it was. I want to say it was 943 in 2019, limited them to only using lighting products that were certified by the Design Lights Consortium, the DLC. So they were the first state, to my knowledge, that actually said, hey, you can only buy a light off of this list. And we can talk about the DLC probably for 2 hours, but they didn't hire a whole lot of plant scientists to put that spec together. They listened to a lot of marketing gurus from the big names in the lighting industry. And that unfortunately tailored people to tailor products that meet specifications, not plant requirements. And it wasn't a healthy standard, in my opinion. 3.0, they did a better job. They are expanding the range of PAR. They're understanding what plant biologically active radiation is, not just photosynthetically active, and they're taking more into consideration. But if you let an energy standards ESCO guy drive a farm, you're going to get a very low consuming energy farm that can't produce product that the consumer wants. It'll ruin your brand, in my opinion. So what Illinois is doing on the energy front is they're pretty stabilized. They're saying, hey, go with DLC. You got 36 watts per square foot. I haven't seen big shifts there. You're looking at some shifts in Massachusetts, but they'll pretty much do whatever California passes. So watch for Title 24 Revision Code 2024 to roll out end of the year. It's already in public comment. You know it's going to pass. And then most states will pick it up. Washington State will grab it right away. I think our law is already written to say whatever California does, we're just going to follow suit. And Massachusetts, theirs isn't codified, but they'll do the same thing. And once those two main players in the energy and the conservation wave of our industry grab hold of it, you'll see Colorado follow suit right away. You'll have outliers. Oklahoma, they're going to, hey, dude, spend as much energy as you want to grow whatever you want. You know, they're pretty libertarian in their mindset there regarding that. Florida the same way. But Missouri, there's zero restrictions on how much energy or water you can consume. It's up to you. It's your business to do what you want to do.
What are the common solutions to these requirements?
Most of them are pushing to eliminate high pressure sodium, you know, the legacy lighting stuff that all of us grew up with. So the HPS is getting pushed out, getting legislated out of existence. You've got big companies like Gavita that now aren't even supporting it. A lot of guys are using Lux and you can't even get the bulbs anymore. So it's kind of being legislated out of existence. Some providers in our industry have found ways around that by just making 1,000-watt LED lights, but now you're spending the same wattage as you were with HPS. You're not really getting any benefit. But there's some stigma in people's minds. I need 1,000 watts. You're like, well, do you know what a watt is? You know, how efficient are you using that watt? So there's some of that education that we still have to do to really help people understand what we're paying for. But that'll be the big push towards conservation. You're also seeing it though on the HVAC side, dehumidification. It's not just lighting centric.
And that's been a really encouraging thing on some of the things that we've been working with CalNext on in terms of crafting. They're in the process of, they just wrapped up their initial study on adaptive lighting controls for greenhouses. They're really focusing on understanding what are the requirements that a plant needs to produce the most yield, and how do we optimize for that? Because if you're able to grow, if you increase yield, that is another way of offsetting energy use, because you're getting more out of the plant putting it in. And so they're looking at horticulture more holistically, and understanding the culture of it, what goes into it, and how those regulations are going to affect it, and doing, you know, a good job of consulting with people like Anthony to get that information. So a lot of that's been really, really encouraging.
When you look at looking at watts per square foot versus watts per gram, I mean, which if you're running an OpEx budget, you're looking at your operating capital and what you're spending every month, your grams per watt should be at forefront on your mind. You can look at grams per square foot, but the power company can only look at the volume of your building and say, we want to look at watts per square foot, right? We're helping them find ways where they can leverage the information that Ryan's collecting. Hey, we've got all this data we're collecting. We can actually get down to watts per gram, watts per saleable ounce. There's some pretty interesting ways that we can quantify energy consumption and show that even if you're spending the same amount of energy, you're spending less per output unit of a product. And that's a key metric that we really have to be mindful of.
Yeah, because like with that, the watts per square foot, I'm wondering, do they take into account like racking systems and the
They
height
do.
of them? And
Yeah, they do. So a lot of, and again, this is going to be, there's like 29 legal states now, right? Each of them have their own quirks and tweaks. That's why people went to see a green, right? We were square foot limited. In Oregon, when we first started, man, we were plant limited. So I'm growing, these 7 foot, 8 foot trees because I could have 8 plants. So I could grow a whole lot of weed on 8 plants, but they're going to be big monsters and it's going to be a long growth cycle. So when people started pushing to see a green and moving to racks and stuff like that, the legislation tailed behind, but they're starting to adjust that. Sometimes you're plant limited, you're canopy square foot limited. Massachusetts, you're not. I've even seen guys who are renting 60,000 square foot facilities and only farming in 30,000 because now I have 72 watts per square foot because I'm occupying, it's not canopy concentric. So they're not counting your canopy, they're counting your square footage. So if I need twice as much energy as you'll allot me to grow the way I want to grow, I'm going to rent more space. And you're seeing a lot of that happening as workarounds and loopholes. So
yeah, and rewarding growers for things that are trackable. So how much CO2 are you using and how much light are you putting out? Like, are you using more light than the plant is able to absorb? And so putting in rewards for that of setting light. These are things that are on the horizon, but they're being considered, and they're intelligent decisions because it's real, it's scientifically based, and it's thought out. Because as Anthony said, people are going to game whatever system gets put in. So the objective has to be growing the highest quality and getting the best economical output, while being mindful of the environment and what that footprint looks like.
California's talking about actual financial incentives to give these guys to tune their grows to be more efficient. And I think that's encouraging to me to see them willing to make those investments in their customers who are the growers, who are our customers, to see them optimize. And optimizations is good for everybody. It's good for the environment, it's good for the business owner, it's good for the consumer. So
okay, what are some of the other benefits to optimizing a grow's lighting efficiency?
Aside from your bottom line, you're going to get a higher quality product. You're going to probably mitigate most of the environmentally caused pathogens, your powdery mildew, some of the terrible things that happen if you're not controlling your hygiene well. And poor hygiene is usually a result of bad environmental control. So if you can control those two things, you can eliminate a lot of the things you'd normally have to mitigate. We think that's a huge advantage for that. But really the bottom line, as silly as it sounds, is the bottom line. As much as passionate as we are about this plant and what it can do for people, it's a business, and you have to be profitable. And if you can control your costs while still producing a high quality product that consumers demand, then it's a win-win for everybody, the environment and the consumer.
And then you get into things like, what can you do on a top line level, more nuanced things. And I think it'd be interesting if you talked, a little bit about the patents that you hold, and kind of how we apply some of the spectral tuning in both greenhouse and vertical settings.
I think that there's definitely advantages there when people are looking at adaptive daylight controls and the ability to control spectrum. So a lot of this is going to tailor itself towards the greenhouse environment where we're taking advantage of the available sunlight, and then we'll try to match that spectrum so we're not supplementing in a couple of odd wavelengths. So we can actually take in a reading through a PAR sensor, process it through Ryan software, and adjust the light to match that spectrum. So we're only adding the amount of supplemental light required. We're not just turning the lights on because, we're short. So say I need to hit a 1,000 ppfd target, a target of luminance on my canopy, and the sun's only providing me 750. Ryan software will measure what's coming through the roof and only provide that much through the lights. So if you have a 600 watt light as an example, and you only need 180 of those watts to produce the supplement, that's all the system does. So it lowers your OpEx considerably that way. And you're hitting a very repeatable standard every time. So I don't have those variables that are, well, we had a really good sunny March and didn't hit and overhit our number. Well, we've got shade curtains that'll auto deploy and we have lights that'll turn off. We're not going to overlight something. So once you get that consistency built in to your system, your product and your yields are consistent, and that consumer experience is going to be the same time after time. I think that's critical. And most good farmers right now are already implementing some sort of system to maintain consistency in their product and their yields. So.
Yeah, and then you open up to adding some intelligence to that, where, you know, if you start, you know, thinking of light not in terms of, you know, a discrete point in time, but what did the plant receive over the course of the day? Well, now you have the ability to plan for, you know, the amount of photons being there for the amount of daylight that you'll have. And so if there was an especially sunny morning, looking at it and understanding, okay, yes, you know, typically I would want a ppfd target of 700, but because the overexposure of the plant in this morning, well, now we can dial back the supplemental light that we're putting throughout the day. Or looking forward and saying, okay, there's an oncoming weather pattern in a week that there's going to be a lot of clouds. So we need to meet that target to make sure the plants are getting a bit more sunlight now. And that's the kind of intelligence that we're getting, a lot like you'd see in a Nest thermostat, where, you know, when there's a cold front coming on, it's going to not, you know, cool things down. It's going to wait a little bit for that to happen. And so that's, you know, things like that. One from, you know, the Title 24 side of things are looking at, but from just your bottom line and making sure that you're not putting in light that isn't going to be used, but then also making sure that if there's going to be, you know, a period where more supplemental light is required, that you're meeting that as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of the guys, Adam, like Arroyo, that do crop steering. You can do crop steering as well using light, implementing some light discipline, frankly. So if you're looking at photo period and calculating your DLI from photo period, you can steer that intelligently. And through machine learning, you don't have to be making these constant calculations. A grower doesn't have to be dedicated to when do I dim my lights and when I turn them up and when I turn them down. It's something that's going to happen organically for your farm, your specific location. And we think that that's a value add that a grower is going to appreciate, because they can scale that. That's a repeatable thing that I can transplant from one spot to another without having one guy getting in his truck and driving from farm to farm to farm to dial things in. You can set a recipe in one location and promulgate that throughout his entire network without having to physically audit those facilities and be there to adjust as the climate changes. So,
okay.
Does that make sense, or did I ramble on? I have a tendency to ramble into minutia that doesn't necessarily benefit.
That's what you're here for.
Right. The minutia rambling man.
So is AI involved in any of this, or will it be?
It will be.
So
it's not in the way you're thinking of AI. It's not Chat GPT style AI. It's machine learning, which is a much more dedicated form of AI. It's not artificial intelligence where it's making decisions for you. You set the exception bands, your high and low parameters, and then the outputs from that harvest get input into the system. And you say, okay, this is what we got. Now, if we narrow that exception band so nothing falls in and out of it, then we can, each time it happens, we can continually refine that recipe through experience, not through some predictive analytics, but it's actually through inputs through the machine learning side. So Brian's the machine learning expert. Big data is not my world of expertise, but I just want to make sure people understand we're not turning it over to Skynet. No one's going to be making decisions without your input. You know, this is all taking what you're learning. If I can go back and just tell a story about this.
Sure.
Had a grow that lost its dehumidifier, and it lost it for 4 days at a weird spot in the grow. I think it was week 4, and we tracked all that. But the end, everyone was panicking. Oh, we're going to have problems. We're going to have this. In the end, we actually ended up with an interesting stressor on that plant that ended up with a very unique terpene profile and a different THC concentration than we were expecting in this cultivar. We were able to replicate that because we logged it, knew what would happen. And we go, hey, if we introduce a weird stress at week 4 on this particular cultivar, this is what we're going to get in the end. Run the experiment, you do it, you go, well, son of a gun, we can do that. So every time we track something that falls outside of exception, the output isn't necessarily a disaster. Sometimes it's a fine tuning of a process that gives you a very unique product. And that kind of data you can't track on your own with a clipboard. You really need to be logging that in real time and have access to it later.
Okay, so
Yeah, and
go ahead.
yeah, no, I mean, just kind of to Anthony's point, the machine learning, it's a great application for machine learning because you have a bunch of discrete variables. You have, integers that, for temperature, for humidity, for CO2, for all of those things that you're looking at, and your output, if you're looking for wet weight, trim weight, dry weight, um, or I mean, even more subjective measurements of, visual appeal or aroma, whatever you're looking to train for, you have good things to point to and for the to process and to filter out the noise and identify the signals of what are driving those changes. So yeah, it's kind of in the same vein when people are talking artificial intelligence. It's a machine that's going and figuring something out for you. It's just a slightly different implementation.
Okay, so how does the cultivation go about making these changes? Let's start with new cultivations. What do you recommend that new cultivation facilities build into their plan from the very beginning with regard to lighting efficiency?
I would start right away with hiring a decent lighting designer or getting with a lighting company or firm that actually implements true lighting design in it. I've seen a lot of, get your free lighting plan from us, and they're kind of generic things and no one guarantees them. So get a good lighting plan, know what your PPFD targets are to start with. And if you have a regulatory limitation on that, on watts per square foot or some sort of energy consumption, that you understand that in front. Don't go to a lighting designer and say, I want 1500 ppfd without knowing why you need 1500 ppfd, if your cultivar can handle it, if you can supplement the CO2, if your energy didn't do it. Make sure you have all that up front. Then go to a real lighting designer or a company that has one on staff, and then make sure that whatever they're going to give you is going to be guaranteed. Hey, are you going to guarantee the results from this? Hey, if you follow our recipe and our mounting schedule, I'll guarantee. And in my instance, and Agxano is the same way. We guarantee that you're going to get what we tell you you're going to get when you hang our lights. So that's what I'd be looking for if I was setting up a new grow right now. But on energy conservation side, there are solar additives right now that have some big rebates. If you're doing a grid tie or even a remote non-grid tied solar, there's a lot of ways you can mitigate your expenses and have somebody else, generally the taxpayer, pick up the bill right now. There's a lot of incentives if you're smart setting up a new facility. It's much harder retrofitting an older facility. Because in most cases, you have to show an energy savings to get an incentive, to get a rebate. So if I'm converting an old warehouse that had very low watts per square foot consumption, and I'm coming in and saying, now I want to go to a 50 watts per square foot on your 8 watt per square foot facility, energy companies have a tendency not to want to write a check for that. So understanding what you're retrofitting versus a new build, new construction is significantly easier, in my opinion, than trying to retrofit an existing structure.
Okay, well, I think you answered like the next two questions.
Sorry.
But that's okay. But what do you say to people who think it's too expensive? What do you?
I say that, I mean, the people who think it's too expensive haven't looked recently. The market pressures post-COVID on the general grow lighting industry, not just my company, have really lowered the overall cost. In most cases, you can get an appropriate grow light to grow cannabis in a completely indoor facility for the same price as you could pick up look at that, as you could have picked up a HPS, a double-ended HPS, 4 or 5 years ago. We're seeing that price point is down with the incentives. It's generally the same cost. But what I really tell them is, don't get sticker shock. Look at your ROI. What is your return on your investment? Now, what is your initial investment? So if you can get that ROI back at 8 months with one light or 14 months with another light, those are things you evaluate, because you're going to have to make the investment anyway. You have to put lighting in a controlled environment, agriculture. It's going to have to be purchased. So buying just on dollars up front, your CapEx, not looking at your ROI, is a fool's errand. You really have to evaluate and go with people who will guarantee your results. Someone comes in and says, I'm going to save you 60% of energy. Well, show me a spreadsheet and then tell me, if I don't, what you're going to do for me. That's who I want to talk to. Too many guys can make you a promise, and unfortunately, it's got a black eye for our industry for the last 5 or 6 years. Lots of big promises, and those companies aren't around anymore. It's companies like yours that have outlasted the time because you deliver what you promise. And those are the companies you have to look at. Don't get sticker shock. Look at your return on your investment. Make sure it's calculated out accurately, that you understand what you're buying and how it's going to pay itself off. And I think that's the right way to do it.
Yeah. And I would say, so get someone to help you look towards the future. I mean, like there's now some good people in the space that'll help you do that. Higher Yields is absolutely one of them. To at least help you have a framework of how am I going to future proof my grow? What are the technologies that are on the horizon that the leading commercial growers are using, that the guys who are getting the best results, why are they getting that? There's a lot of really good information out there, but the technology that's coming to market is easy to deploy. You're not having to have an engineering firm come in and help you deploy sensors. There's wireless technology that you can put down for both sensing, for control, for HVAC type equipment, and for lighting, stuff that has open protocols that plays well with other other technology. You don't want to get locked in where you're now in an ecosystem where you're buying all proprietary parts, and when they decide that they're going to increase their subscription fee that was $10 a month and now it's $1,000 a month, and you're out there, they've locked your data. Understand that kind of stuff, because there's a lot of really good technology that people are using that are giving real results. And even if it's something that you're not deploying now, to have a vision kind of towards the future, and just make sure that you're not getting locked into something that's going to be tough to unlock later.
So our decision to work with Agxano, this goes back 5 years now. We made all of our lights compatible without adding any tiered cost. And we were fairly agnostic about controls, and we still are. We're completely agnostic. So you can hang our light and use anybody's controls with them, but they're compatible with anybody with an open protocol. I won't tie myself into any closed ecosystem like Ryan was saying. And he mentioned future proofing, and I couldn't agree more. You want to have dynamically tunable spectrum, because you don't know what the next round of research is going to reveal about, hey, if we change this circadian rhythm, we get this cannabinoid impact. And we're seeing stuff like that right now. So if you don't have something that's dynamically tunable, that you can't infinitely adjust in terms of your intensities and your spectrum, you're pigeonholed. You're not going to be able to move forward with that. And if it doesn't cost you anymore, why wouldn't you want that? You don't have to turn that switch on, but having it available is, I think, is pretty critical. And make sure, like Ryan said, man, do not lock yourself into some proprietary one guy show, because if something happens to that one guy, you're hosed. And then he's got you by the short hairs. He can raise and lower your costs at a whim, and you have very little control at that point over it. I won't mention specific companies, but I've dealt with some large irrigation companies that require on-site engineers that you have to pay for their day and their travel and their per diem to come out and program their stuff. It's not readily accessible. I can't just pop on and walk through a drop-down menu and go, okay, that's what I want, go. I got to go, no, I got to hire Bob, and Bob's got to come out for 4 days and program it. And when Bob leaves, I have no idea what he did, and I can't do it myself. So I think it's really critical that you have stuff that you can get your hands around, or that it's so plug and play simple that you don't have to worry about having a specialist on staff to manage it, because that goes back to ROI.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier, could you expand on existing facilities? What are the difficulties with that as opposed to brand new systems?
We're talking about an existing cultivation facility that's already growing cannabis. Retrofitting in there is generally quite simple. You've already got your license, your engineering plans have been done, you have your power drops and feeds. So then it's just a matter of swapping out a light that's going to give you good canopy penetration and uniformity, depending on your footprint and your grow style. Guys who are growing in racks, like pip racking and stuff like that, they've got a very specific 4x8 tray they're lighting. It's not rocket science to provide a uniform thing over that. Knowing what your mounting height is, those are all pretty simple stuff. But if you're going into retrofitting a facility, you've got to hire somebody who's done it and knows what they're doing. Trying to scale your, hey, I grew in my garage with a 20 light grow for 5 years, so I'm going to be a commercial farmer. That is a long jump. It's a bridge that's a lot longer than most guys are willing to admit to themselves. Having the competency to manage a garage grow, or a big basement grow, or a small 20 light legacy grow is a different animal than a 30,000 square foot commercial facility. You have to hire professionals who understand those challenges, get a good engineering firm, and for God's sake, please hire an environmental consultant first to walk through that building and make sure you don't have anything you got to mitigate. I've watched a lot of guys in some beautiful brick buildings that should have probably been turned into lovely loft apartments in downtown areas that tried to turn them into cannabis grows that found lead and asbestos and all sorts of mitigative things that tripled their cost of expansion. And that's a crippling blow to a startup.
Just about coming to the end, do you have any other further tips or anything else you'd like to discuss?
I mean, from my end, shameless plug. I mean, we have been in this industry on the LED side of it for a very long time. I've got a dozen patents just in horticulture about how to generate spectrum appropriately at the lowest possible cost, and we domestically manufacture everything. I'd really like to just make sure people know there are companies in America who still do it in America and still have boots on the ground here to support you. And yeah, that's kind of what I'd like to leave viewers with. That's the biggest tip.
Okay, so where do people look you guys up?
You can catch us through Agxano's website. I mean, we pretty much run all the commercial lighting through Agxano. We're an R&D manufacturing company, and we rely on guys like Ryan and his team to do the sales out there. So I think it's Agxano, Agxano.com. It's the best place to find us.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, guys. It's been really great, very informative.
Pleasure. It really was.
Learned a couple things.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.